I was given a spider plant like this 10 years ago by a colleague in teaching in school. And it grew into something like this after about 18 months. And it had, these were all little baby plants, which you essentially put in soil, they take root, and then when after about a month you snip that off, you've got a brand new potential. You have a baby, which you take care of, it will blossom, mature, and have another 50 babies, and then another 50 babies, and then another 50 babies. So over this past 10 years, it's remarkable. I was given a plant like this. I've had 7 cycles of growing into a big plant and then giving tons of babies out. And every time I gave them out, I said, hey, there's an expression, pay it forward. Keep it going. So when you get some babies, pass them on, pass them on, pass them on. It's a crude example of what I'm praying, which is that as we grow into Christ-likeness, the fruit that we bear, establish in new soil, and then that grows into a bigger plant, bears fruit, and establishes. I'm going to pray right now. Jesus, you are the center of it all. I pray for your Spirit to be with us. Soften our hearts to hear what you have to say to us. Open our ears that we might hear your voice. To give you all the glory and all the honor. Amen. Amen. If you recall last week, we were talking about how David's character was created in the kind of closeness or intimacy, a real dependence that he had with God. This expression with God, David was with God. And the verse we read earlier on shows us how God prepared David in the soil of service long before he took on the public figure of king. The loyalty that David showed, this humility, he did not go forward and take the crown. He continued to serve Saul. There's this quiet, unseen, foundational work consistently happening that kept him close to God and God's ways throughout his young life as a shepherd, and then when he became the kind of further servant. There's this in Samuel, he took food for his brothers on the front lines of the war. He was called on Saul to serve him as his personal worship leader and armor bearer, and he served him without comparison, without compare. He was renowned. The question, who of all your servants is as loyal as David? And there was no one to answer, to say anyone else was. And here we get a glimpse again of how David was like God, a man after God's own heart. He sacrificed opportunity after opportunity to reach out and take what God had promised him. He chose instead to honor and serve a man who often tried to take his life, knowing that it was God's purpose. David's choice to serve was a critical element in his root system, in his foundation. Not only an incredible expression of his trust in God, it also revealed that David understood something about what it meant to be the Lord's anointed one. Unlike Saul, David recognized that his position of power was in fact a position of great responsibility and accountability. It was a position of serving. As we will be doing, if you can, it'd be lovely to see you in a couple of weeks. It's just an interesting timing. It wasn't set up. It wasn't suggested, and I just thought, hey, that links entirely with what we're doing this week. It's these practical things. And David's choice to embrace servanthood as the appropriate role for a would-be king was a foreshadowing of Jesus, the true and eternal servant king. Sorry, that's a terribly long sentence. I don't know if that made any sense to you when I said that yet. What I mean to say is that David was behaving just like Jesus, the King of Kings, when he served. And it's important we understand how Jesus served. In Luke 9, verses 1 to 6, you see this, Jesus deputizes his disciples to carry his power and authority, sends them out to preach and heal, then involves them in the feeding of the 5,000. Peter, James, and John had this encounter on the mountain with the transfigured Jesus talking with Moses and Elijah, and then actually hearing the voice of God from heaven. The disciples, we're enjoying watching The Chosen right now as we get to know their characters, and they are so human. It's so easy to say, oh, we're not. As I get older and I realise just how daft I can be, I don't judge the disciples so often that sometimes you just want to say, you just missed the point entirely. A dispute arose among them as to which of them will be greatest after seeing these amazing things. And they're squabbling over who will be the greatest. And again, I'm not saying I'm above that. I just find it remarkable. Jesus says, he who is least among you shall be great. In Matthew 20, he says, yet it shall not be so among you, but whoever decides to become great among you, let him be your servant. And whoever decides to be first among you, let him be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. And the way Jesus served people just blew the minds of the disciples. Again and again, they would find their leader, the promised Messiah and King, serving the kind of people no respectable Jewish man as they would even approach. He talks to the Samaritan woman at the well. He stops to have lunch with a hated tax collector. He touched the unclean leper. He served children, prostitutes, foreigners, Roman soldiers, and beggars. Just before he went to the cross, Jesus tells the disciples that they were to serve one another as he had served him, as he had served them. And he gives them this unforgettable lesson. Taking the role of a servant and washing their feet. I don't know about you, but my feet are an absolute disaster. Horrible. They're like Monster Munch. You know what Monster Munch are? They're these big, wide, big, stubby, horrible things. They freak me out. The thought of the reality of someone washing my feet, it's a profound statement. Profound statement to go there. So John 13 says, so when he had washed their feet, taking their garments, sat down again, he said to them, do you know what I've done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you say, well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. And later he follows up. As the Father loved me, I also have loved you. Abide in my love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may remain in you, and that your joy may be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. This progression from do as I have done to you to love one another as I have loved you is Jesus' revelation of what true love, the greatest love, looks like. It looks like washing someone's feet. It's been said love does. Love is a verb. Love looks like sitting with a lonely person over a cup of tea, or wrapping your best coat around someone that is without a coat. It's like doing the washing up. It's a remarkable thing I've experienced in the church. Again, I don't say it's judgment because I've been there, but you get people who want to change the world. I'm going to take the city, I'm going to lead worship to thousands of people. Who want to change the world, but there are so few volunteers to do the washing up. Present company excluded. I must say that. Mark Avon, it is one of my favourite sights to drive out to the dump and I look to my right and I see the windows are all fogged up and this perfect example of service. My friend Chris over here frequently says it's about the importance of service, small things. When you in the back, these things really count. We're called to serve, particularly to serve the poor. God is a protector of the poor. He's a soft spot for them, as we should too. We've been looking at the Psalms, and there's just this refrain all the way through the Psalms. Psalm 72 says, he will defend the afflicted among the people save the children and the needy. Psalm 12:5 says, because of the oppression of the weak and the groaning of the needy, I will now arise, says the Lord. I will protect them, those who rely on them. Psalm 82, God commands, defend the cause of the weak and the fatherless, maintain the rights of the poor and the oppressed, deliver them from the hand of the wicked. And I pray that we as a church grow our roots into this bedrock behavior of servanthood. Further, it's just more we get better. And in a sense, as Gerda was saying, community observe what you're doing, why you're doing it. And we think it's important, and then we get into a conversation about who and why. Our second reading this morning was Psalm 23. It's a favourite of mine. It wouldn't surprise me if it's a favourite of yours too. My dad taught me it when I was a boy. His dad taught him it. He was a boy. Way back. It's the one that we've got on our fridge. And I will teach my kids. It's the Psalm of Psalms, some would say. It's so familiar, but sometimes perhaps it's too familiar. Because I've got some other stuff on my fridge. Some of it's a bit hokey, a bit cliche, a bit like a naff kind of inspirational poster. And this psalm needs to be seen above those things. The sharp edges can sometimes get blurred. And I hope this morning we can see the psalm in a fresher way. I've certainly, as I prepared this sermon, I see things in a new way. I find it's really exciting. The meaning is not that it just shows us that we are safe when we feel threatened, although that's hugely important. I hope we get a better understanding of how we can take care of each other, how we can take care of the poor and the needy. Now, I don't know whether you've ever even seen a shepherd. I've seen some on the telly, a lot on the telly. There's this show right now, the lady in Yorkshire has got about 15 kids. They're shepherdess. It's good TV. There's one man and his dog. There's lots of stuff on Country Farm, usually up north somewhere. Probably on Wallace and Gromit, I've seen a shepherd. You see the kind of Christmas with the tea towel on their head. But on reflection, I realised I don't know if I've ever really seen a shepherd just doing their job. The closest I've come to seeing a shepherd was cowboys. It's a very similar job. The job is to lead cows, like a shepherd would his sheep, over wide spaces of land, moving constantly from food source to food source, keeping them safe, remote places. I spent quite a few years in my 20s working in Montana and Wyoming, which is like in the west coast of the USA. And it was a bit like a DV. I'd take these groups out, I'd get a massive backpack on, and we hiked 50, 60 mile loops into the backcountry and back. And it was wild. Mountains, rivers, snow, hail. Charlie Newland loved it. It was hard country. It was hard learning. I remember one memorable evening after a day of hiking, we riding outside. The boys and girls, you throw your pack down, and they would come down for a little while, and they'd tell me I want to go home. And then I'd quickly switch it to, okay, now it's dinner time, and I'd get the fire going. And remarkably, wonderfully, the teenagers, it's amazing how teenagers, the boys particularly, would just suddenly become different when you promise them food is coming. And we stopped at a place called Cowboy Camp. And unlike all the others we've gone through, which was pretty pristine, Cowboy Camp was super rough. There were broken bottles everywhere, cigarette butts everywhere, and to their wonderful surprise, loads of bullet casings. Now I've seen too many westerns, and I just like the thought of at Cowboy Camp, there was one guy he was throwing it in the air, and his mate was shooting the thing down. Because the cowboys out there were rough. They were rough. And they had to be. Because it's a rough job. And this was bear country, and there were wolves. And their duty was to protect their livestock. And they were just hard people. We could see them. We had a few interactions with them. They weren't particularly nice. In a sense, I was kind of behaving like a shepherd as well. My job title was wilderness guide, and as a shepherd with his flock, my task was to guide these young people into remote places, keep them safe, keep them fed. My teenage flock were like a flock of sheep, very unpredictable. If there was a sudden sharp precipice, they would find it, even if it was way off the path. If there were dangerous objects like bullets, razor wire, broken glass, they would pick them up and ask me, is it funny if I throw this in the fire? And that's not funny. But that's what they would do. As for natural threats, snakes, bears, poison ivy, even in such a vast wilderness, they would find ways that would draw them to us. This job was about leading the reckless and inexperienced over the mountains. What was interesting, the boys were often afraid, and it was my job to help them with that. I had a massive torch, a security guard torch, a big mag-like thing. And when we would bed down for the night, some nights you would hear things howling. There's a seriously scary sound. If you're in the middle of nowhere and these things are howling, I don't promise the boys, listen, if that thing comes down here, I'm going to take his head off because they would whack. So I'd sit by the fire. Thankfully, I never had to test that because the wolf's a big thing and I don't know how that would have turned out. But I learned a lot about this role in a strange way. And I just found that was so interesting because I've never really seen a shepherd. But it begs the question, why does this psalm mean so much to me? Still, what we're talking about, it somehow transcends this Palestinian countryside and the work of this ancient Hebrew shepherd poet. Somehow this psalm retains its beauty and its truth in our world of concrete roads, fast cars, domesticated pets and shopping malls. As we walk around with happy shopper just up the street, we've got smartphones in our pocket, and we still love this psalm, which is in so many ways sort of distant from what is normal for us. It is. We say, the Lord is my shepherd. He's identified as the image of God. It's a comforting thing. God is good and present, our shepherd Lord. Steady and watchful, quiet and strong. Just as you're being lulled to sleep by the sounds of waters flowing by, a great shadow of all that's wrong in the world is introduced. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. The shadow is death, and perhaps its harbingers, the things that carry death and destruction, cancer, Alzheimer's, or debt, or depression, divorce, abuse, domestic violence, poverty, homelessness. These are all the things that threaten the good life we're offered. And our lives are lived in the company of both. The shepherd and the shadow. Sheep are notorious for their stupidity. Left to themselves, as you can guess, they just wander all over the place. And I can certainly relate. There's a wonderful hymn called, I forget the name. The hymn goes, I'm prone to wander. Prone to wander. The psalmist, after a lifetime of being guided by the shepherd, knows God's rod and staff have been guiding him around deep chasms. Because the shepherd knows that in those deep chasms, those valleys, lurk beasts that mean us harm. And so with guidance, the sheep finds itself led to little hollows where water and grass make life possible and safe and enjoyable. And it's important to remember that life in the desert for the shepherd and the sheep wasn't some sun-drenched jolly. It's menaced by these dark shadows. Threats to life are all around. presence of the shepherd guides and disperses the threat. This I found really interesting. The second half of the psalm exchanges the image of a sheep for that of a fugitive. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. See, in the ancient desert culture, if a man committed a serious crime, if he murdered someone, he would run to the desert. He would run to the wild country. It was a place of exile, completely uninhabited except for the shepherds. And the law of the desert was plain. Once you were exiled, you would be hunted down by the people whose tribe or family you had murdered. And it was their right, and perhaps duty, to take your life in the desert. And if not you, your son or your tribe, it was a law. It was a horrible home for a fugitive. Fear and death everywhere. But there was this one exception to the unfriendliness of the desert. The exception was the custom of hospitality within the shepherd's tent. One writer called it the golden piety of the wilderness. See, every wanderer in the desert, whatever his character or his past, was received into a shepherd's tent as a guest of God. Furnished with food and kept safe. The shepherd's host took responsibility for his safety. No questions asked. It's true, and it remains true even now. In Bedouin cultures, there is still this ancient tradition of hospitality. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. And this is the fugitive speaking, the man threatened by his past, the man tormented by the curse of blood and revenge. He's not just accepted in, he's welcomed into the tent. And in the presence of his enemies, the enemies may be at the door. He is safe. They can't come in. He served a meal. He's safe in the shepherd's tent. God doesn't just create us and turn us loose to make the best of it if we can. He doesn't just let us spend for ourselves until we die and hold before the judgment seat. He's the shepherd who guides us in our wanderings and sustains us in our fugitive lives. Karl Barth said this, lovely, his Lord is never absent, passive, non-responsible or impotent, but always present, active, responsible, and omnipotent. He is never dead, but always living, always awake, never uninterested, but always concerned. For the sheep in danger of the deep shadows in the valley of death, the shepherd is the guide. For the fugitive pursued by the shadow of death, the shepherd is a protective host. The last word on Psalm 23 was spoken by Jesus. I am, he said, the good shepherd. Now there are, of course, both good and bad shepherds in Palestine. And the final test of a shepherd was how far he would go in risking his life to protect sheep or fugitives. A good one would protect his sheep and fugitives. It's a brave thing for a shepherd to follow a silly sheep down into a dark place. And you've got to remember, these fugitives come with baggage. There's a reason why they're running. Murderers, not harmless characters, certainly. A shepherd lived a dangerous life. And when Jesus announced to his followers that he was a good shepherd, I don't think they would have understood him to mean that he was this gentle, nice, kind shepherd who wore his hair parted down the middle and would walk with a lamb between his shoulders, skipping about green fields. They lived in shepherd country and lived around the realities of shepherd's life. Being a good shepherd meant taking the risk of life against beasts, robbers and murderers. And we know that Jesus did just that. He entered Jerusalem when it was filled with shadows of hate and murder. He faced on behalf of all the wandering sheep and fleeing fugitives of the world, combined accusations and assaults of religion and government. We know he blessed Judas. We know he blessed Judas with a meal on the very night he betrayed him. Jesus, as ever, fills out in marvelous detail. Psalm 23. And our shepherd continues to work in the lives of men and women. guiding them, saving them, guiding us, saving us. In Jesus, the Good Shepherd, we see guidance and grace. Guidance for sheep who are prone to wander, and grace for the guilty fugitive. I get the impression that some of us can relate to both. Some of us are restless, been running from things we've done for a very long time, and very tired, and seek a place to put down our baggage. Some others of us need to be reminded that to come to Jesus is to come to the Good Shepherd. Be accepted exactly as you are, regardless of what you've done. I'm going to read something from 1 Peter. This is the Amplified version. Casting all your cares, all your anxieties, all your worries, and all your concerns once and all on Him. Cast them on Him, for He cares about you with deepest affection and watches over you very carefully. Be sober, as well balanced and self-disciplined. Be alert and cautious at all times. That enemy of yours, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, fiercely hungry, seeking someone to devour. But resist him, be firm in your faith against his attack, rooted, established, and immovable, having the same experience of suffering are being experienced by your brothers and sisters throughout the world. After you have suffered for a little while, the God of all grace who imparts His blessing and favour will call you to His own eternal glory in Christ, will Himself complete, confirm, strengthen, and establish you, as making you what you ought to be. To Him be dominion, power, authority, sovereignty, forever and ever. Amen. Lord, I give this I thank you for this morning. I pray that we all saints be rooted in you, Jesus. Like that small but healthy plant I used at the beginning. May we find our roots digging deep in this model that you show us, Jesus, of servanthood.